Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. When a distressed man called the Las Vegas, Nevada Rescue Service on Saturday, April 5, 1997, to report his wife missing, the dispatcher took the call. The man, who was identified as Mark Hollinger, clarified that Ginger Rios was the name of his wife. They had recently moved into a new home the day before and had only been married for 5 months. When Ginger walked into a store and appeared to disappear, they were shopping for a new house. The police started looking into it. Even in a city with its share of sins, detectives had never heard of a disappearance so enigmatic. The unusualness of this case, where you believe you know exactly what happened, but you are wrong and have to start over, was beyond their wildest expectations. Ginger Rios was a 20-year-old Las Vegas resident and worker. Ginger and her younger sister Daniela were beloved daughters of her parents, George and Denise. The girls were surrounded by care and attention as they grew up. Ginger had always wanted to be a performer, and she was lucky to be born in Las Vegas because, by the time she was 20, she was a part of a popular group that played in casinos and hotels. Additionally, she met Mark Hollinger, a man who was 14 years her senior. Mark was very kind to Ginger. The young couple quickly made the decision to legalize their relationship after he helped her in every way. They were married in November 1996, when Ginger was just 20 and Mark was 34. Because Mark was a quiet introvert and Ginger was a happy extrovert, some people thought their union was unusual. However, they were already planning how to construct their family nest and were a perfect match. Ginger discovered a fantastic house with a buyout option that was for rent in the spring of 1997. Ginger could already picture converting the house's large basement into a dance studio. She dreamed of eventually buying the house because she liked it so much, but she and Mark needed a good credit history in order to make this dream a reality. Ginger wanted to purchase books that offered pertinent advice because they needed a clear plan for how they would handle their money. In the city, a store that carried the exact books Ginger was looking for was becoming well known. Spy Shop was an odd moniker for it. It resembled an adult candy store. Its bookshelves were stocked with lockpicks, police badges, concealed surveillance cameras, automobile alarms, image transmitting glasses, and even tools for removing store security tags from clothing. It was ideally situated in the heart of the city. The young couple went shopping, including buying books, on Friday, April 4th, which was literally the day after they had moved into their new house. Mark parked right in front of the entrance at about 4 in the afternoon. Ginger took her wallet, which contained some cash and her identification, and went inside after telling her husband to wait in the car. Mark thought she would emerge quickly, but he was able to finish his cigarette and she hadn't shown up yet. He waited a bit longer, thinking she might be in line, and then made the decision to see how his wife was doing. The store was small enough for him to notice Ginger's absence right away. He inquired if the man and woman behind the counter had seen Ginger and gave them a description of her. Naturally, they responded that she had simply entered, purchased 2 books, and departed. She couldn't have gone very far, they added. Despite his surprise, Mark chose to browse other stores in case she needed to buy something else. He entered each one and inquired if anyone had spotted the slim brunette, but nobody had. There were no limits to his awe. She couldn't have just slipped past the car, which was parked directly in front of the entrance. In the middle of the day, Ginger had just vanished. Mark went to his wife's parents because he had run out of options. George, Ginger's father, thought right away that the spy shop would undoubtedly have security cameras if any store had them. After she left the store, they might be able to see at least which way she went. In addition to being notable for its distinctive merchandise, this store closed earlier than other establishments in Vegas. So Mark and George rushed back, praying the storekeeper hadn't already left. Mark was able to identify the man and woman getting into a van with a baby, even though the store was closed. They came over and gave an explanation. The man identified himself as John Flowers and asserted that he was the shop's owner. He clarified that in order to avoid traffic, he and his spouse had already closed the doors and set the alarm because they intended to depart before the weekend. He would be pleased to show them any video on Monday, but they had to move quickly. Despite their extreme frustration, Mark and George didn't want to clog up traffic for a family with a small child. The men went home and decided to call the police in the morning if the young woman wasn't there by nightfall or evening. Mark dialed 911 as soon as the sun came up. After being assigned to the case, Detective Jeff Rosen naturally started his investigation by attempting to find out more about the girl's life prior to her disappearance. She seemed to have a very happy life. She was truly loved by her sister and parents. Her career was booming. She had recently moved into a new house, and she had only been married for 5 months. She didn't seem to have any reason to flee, or did she? Is there something that nobody is aware of? What if she had purchased something else that made her disappear in the store instead of financial books? A few weeks ago, George remembered, his daughter had talked about going to that same store, but he had no recollection of her discussing anything out of the ordinary or buying anything during her visit. Her family came to the conclusion that she had to have been kidnapped in some way, but how could this have happened so quickly without her yelling or phoning for assistance? Did this mean she was acquainted with her kidnapper? The young woman did not take out her most recent paycheck or use her credit cards after she vanished. This implied that her disappearance was probably not voluntary. The detective also talked to the girl's friends and co-workers, who had a very different perspective on Ginger's life. Initially, the girl was not as ecstatic about her career advancement as it may have appeared. She felt that she ought to have pursued a solo career by now, instead of serving as a backup vocalist. Second, some strangers who saw her on stage made persistent advances and even harassed her, which she didn't like. Thirdly, she experienced severe mood swings as a result of having to take weight loss pills. Lastly, she had been living in a hotel for a while in order to avoid going home because her marriage was not going well. Detective Rosen believed Mark was concealing something because he had heard enough, but Mark's tale had remained unchanged. Ginger's parents maintained that it was a waste of time and money to suspect Mark because he had no apparent reason to hurt his wife. However, there were no other leads in the investigation. Only Mark's story had been told. The girl's purchases were verified by the shop owner, of course, but could anyone be certain that Ginger didn't go back to the car before Mark did something to her? Mark fervently hoped his wife had just escaped. At least she was safe, even though it wounded his pride. He even made an effort to carry out his own investigation, interviewing people and looking for Ginger or any leads in the city with George. Mark was Ginger's husband, so on the one hand he loved her and undoubtedly spent every moment he had free looking for her. Detective Rosen, however, interpreted this as an effort to deflect attention away from himself. In fact, Mark's leads were insignificant compared to the police's subsequent lead, which was aimed directly at Mark. Patrol officers discovered what turned out to be Mark's burning car in the parking lot of a nearby shopping center. What did he say about this? He was unaware. He just left the car in the parking lot and took a cab home after work when the engine began to make odd noises. To put it another way, the police had to assume it was a coincidence because the probable crime scene, assuming Mark had actually done anything to Ginger, was on fire. Despite the fact that it would take some time, forensic specialists took the vehicle for examination. The detectives decided to restart the investigation from the location where she was last seen by someone other than her husband because they had spent too much time concentrating on Mark. Although John Flowers, the proprietor of Spy Shop, was not there at the time, one of his staff members gave the police permission to search the area. They went through every room, but they didn't perform a thorough search. When Detective Jeff Rosen entered the storeroom, the overpowering smell of bleach nearly knocked him off his feet, but he didn't find anything odd in the store itself. He saw a small reddish-brown stain on the wall that might have been blood. Just in case, they made the decision to take it for analysis. John Flowers was notified by Rosen that the police had come to his store. Although John was shocked that they hadn't located the girl yet, he was happy to answer all of the questions. He clarified that the reason for the bleach odor in the storeroom was that he had to clean up after his dog using it as a toilet on a regular basis. A small drop of blood might have gotten there that way. He would have to visit the store to locate the security camera footage and the book purchase receipts, then turn them over to the police. When Rosen inquired about the books Ginger had purchased, the surprise was revealed. One book focused on contract killers and the other on establishing a new identity. However, why did Ginger purchase these? Did someone coerce her into purchasing these books and then murder her in one of the ways outlined in the second book? Or did she truly intend to vanish? Though it was too small to analyze, the tiny spot on the wall may have bled. But since everyone already knew Ginger had been in the store and gone, determining her subsequent whereabouts was far more important. Given Ginger's remarkable beauty and public appearances, there were, in fact, a number of potential leads. She could have been seen by a large number of people, including those with malicious intent. In addition, her father was a dealer at one of Vegas's most well-known casinos. Things can get messy when it comes to money. Weeks passed, and there was less and less chance that the girl would be found alive. When the response about Mark's car arrived, guess what? They discovered nothing at all, including no blood or indications of struggle. It was then that Rosine remembered John Flowers. He thought about watching the security camera footage to see if Ginger had been approached at the store's exit, but it was too late for him. "Where have you been all this time, guys?" John exclaimed, explaining that he had watched the video and witnessed Ginger walk into the store, select the books, pay with cash, and walk out. The video had been replaced with fresh footage from the security camera because no one had arrived to watch it. John was also unable to locate the book's receipt, even though he was positive it was somewhere. John appeared reluctant to continue working with the detective after this, in part because of the negative impact that the police, the media, and interested bystanders had on his business following Ginger's disappearance. Although it made sense, selling lockpicks and phony police badges in a store already stocked with law enforcement gear severely strained his small business. Rosin was aware of this, and John had nothing to encourage him to speak with them. The police had no fresh leads, and the case was put on hold. The truth was there, in fact, but it would take several more months for the detectives investigating Ginger's case to realize it. A team of hunters discovered a shallow grave in the Mojave Desert on May 5, almost 400 miles from Las Vegas. The body in the grave was identified by the medical examiner as that of a young, dark-haired girl between the ages of 15 and 18. The murderer had not taken her very distinctive jewelry, which included a pink ring with 3 different colored stones and another ring that resembled wire loops intertwined to form the letter Mem or W. Could the M represent Mark? Or was it a family heirloom because Ginger's mother's maiden name was Waterworth? However, she had no identification on her person. The local police released pictures of the jewelry in the hopes of garnering public support, but they would not find out for a very long time. Meanwhile, the detectives needed a body or a lead to solve the case. On August 16, 1997, Jeff Rosin was suddenly contacted by phone. The caller claimed to have a lead on the Ginger case and identified himself as an Arizona federal agent. Rosin was curious. What was the connection between Ginger and John Flowers' alleged sale of unlawful eavesdropping devices? The agent clarified. The agent went on. John had fled because he didn't want to be taken into custody, but Cheryl Subzone, his wife, had been taken into custody to be questioned. She abruptly began discussing Ginger Rios, who had vanished in Vegas a few months prior. While they were curious about the whereabouts of her husband, the agent went out of the room to call Rosin. Only now did Rosin realize that he had never asked the proprietor of the spy shop where Ginger was last seen a formal question. Nevertheless, Ginger's spouse had mentioned that a man and a woman were behind the counter. Rosin rushed to Arizona after requesting that the agents keep an eye on Cheryl. Rosin had no idea what would come out of Cheryl's interrogation. John Flowers turned to Cheryl and asked her to go buy film when Ginger came in to look at the books. When they worked together at the store, she frequently ran errands, so this wasn't out of the ordinary. After 10 minutes or so, Cheryl came back, and Mark entered. John informed Mark that his wife couldn't have gone very far because she had just left. After thanking them, Mark walked away. Cheryl's husband appeared to be a completely different person. His face was filled with fear. The man said, "I did something terrible. Whatever you do, don't go into the storage room." Cheryl didn't know what he meant, and she never thought her husband had hurt anyone. She asked him what was going on. She was disturbed by his actions, though, and after a little while she made the decision to look in the storage room. She discovered a young girl's lifeless body inside, with a pool of blood encircling her head, and there was blood on the carpet. The girl had suffered severe physical abuse. Before John sent Cheryl to get film, the same girl had come into the store. When Cheryl realized that John was right behind her, her disgust quickly gave way to fear. He took her by the neck before she had even turned around, warning her that if she talked about what had happened there, something bad would happen to both her and their child. Although Cheryl complied with his orders, she made the decision to speak the truth now that John was fugitive. John's explanation of the situation to Cheryl was of interest to the detective. John informed her that Ginger was in possession of a note from two of his former workers requesting payment. John was allegedly so enraged by Ginger's impudence and the contents of the note that he struck her so forcefully in the face that she fell back, struck her head, and passed away. But Cheryl had never seen the note and was certain that this was a lie. She was certain that John had spent hours in the storage room, wrapping the girl's body in plastic bags and dousing her in bleach after stealing garbage bags. He had informed the staff member that the dog had urinated in the room. After placing the body in his van, he instructed Cheryl that they must depart for Arizona right away. At that point, Ginger's husband and father came up to them and begged them to play the security camera footage. Ginger was lying inches from John and Cheryl, but they looked them in the eyes and lied. That's not all, though. Cheryl was also aware of the location of her husband's burial. You see, John and Cheryl had visited the Mojave Desert on multiple occasions. John once drove off with their baby and the body of the girl, leaving Cheryl in the middle of nowhere. He obviously drove home after burying her and coming back for Cheryl. For him, though, this was insufficient. In order for John to cover the shallow grave with a layer of concrete, they returned there multiple times. Cheryl was pretty sure the police had already found Ginger's body because it was the last time John had run back, screaming in panic, "They found her! They found her!" At any rate, she consented to show the detectives the place in return for not being charged. Since they didn't think Cheryl had anything to do with the murder, they accepted her offer. They followed her to the location. Upon their arrival in the desert, the local officers began to make connections between Cheryl's revelation and the body discovered by hunters in May. After asking them to stop, Cheryl took them to the location where her husband had been. Instead of discovering an empty grave, the police arrived at what appeared to be an undisturbed concrete slab. They found the body wrapped in plastic bags there. They were initially identified as Ginger because of a tattoo on her lower back, but they chose to hold off on telling her family until DNA testing was completed. Several questions were left unanswered by this. Were there two victims? Did John murder them both? Why, if so? Who was the other girl? They were now able to obtain a search warrant for the store in Vegas, where they discovered evidence of Ginger's blood. Later, the DNA analysis verified that she was also the owner of the body found in the desert. Mark was devastated because he had hoped that his wife had just moved on and started a new life. He held himself responsible, believing that he ought to accompany her to the store. But how could he have thought that his wife, a mother and his devoted wife, would be attacked by a total stranger, the proprietor of a well-known and often visited store? After a brief period of hiding, John was taken into custody at a Los Angeles hotel. The detectives found that John Flowers, the proprietor of the spy shop chain, was not present when the extradition procedure started. Rather, a 26-year-old man named Craig Jacobson was wanted for offenses in Florida. The boy had battled mental health problems since he was 10 years old, with borderline personality disorder, paranoia, and probably antisocial personality disorder. After a year in a mental health facility, he was sentenced to 30 months in prison and 3 years of probation. However, he vanished in 1995. John appeared in his place. In addition to this discovery, 2 months earlier, the police had discovered another possible victim of Craig or John. Before she could even look at the merchandise, the owner of the Vegas store came up to the adolescent girl, slung her over his shoulder, and carried her into the storeroom without saying a word. She was extremely lucky, because John Flowers let her go after being frightened away by another customer who entered the store. Fear prevented this young woman from calling the police, and it might have been problematic for her to contradict the statement of a well-known businessman. Naturally, this was prior to the revelation of John's true identity. Psychiatrists examined him several times over the next few months and concluded he was not fit to stand trial. Despite being certain that Craig was lying, the prosecutor was concerned that the crime might go unpunished. He informed Ginger's family that a plea bargain would be the best course of action. Prior to being eligible for parole, Craig was sentenced to 25 years in prison after entering a guilty plea to the murder. Craig said that the other girl's name was Mary Stoddard. When he abducted and murdered her, she was the 18-year-old daughter of a chiropractor who had traveled to Vegas. In order to at least receive a life sentence or perhaps even the death penalty, Ginger Rios' family hoped that he would be charged with Mary's murder. The catch is that Mary Stoddard, who Craig described as the daughter of a chiropractor, was still alive and well. They had already taken a DNA sample and made a 3D model of the unidentified girl's possible appearance, but her body had already been exhumed. As it turned out, the documents containing information about her place of burial were lost, and no one knew which grave she was in, so this was all the police had. To put it another way, they had lost the body. The police, however, persisted in their efforts to identify her. There were 300 people on their list of missing persons. After 13 years, they were finally able to identify the girl on June 30, 2010. She was, more specifically, a 15-year-old girl from Phoenix, Arizona named Christina Mary Martinez. The girl lived in a group home, but she was mistreated there, so she frequently fled. She was taking a load of laundry to a self-service laundromat when she vanished on May 3, 1997. She passed Phoenix's spy shop on her way. Even though Christina had a rough upbringing, she had a lot of loved ones who were always looking for her, including her friend Valerie. To raise awareness of Christina's disappearance, Valerie set up a number of social media accounts. Valerie used to say, "I will never stop thinking about her, and I won't give up, no matter how long it takes. She is more than just a case number to me. I cherished her." Never giving up on finding someone is the essence of true love. Valerie had no idea that Christina, who was 16 years old when she vanished in the desert, had been found a week later. Regarding the girl's ring's mystery, the letter M on it stands for Martinez. It's interesting that Craig dated Mary Stoddard when they were both younger, according to the real Mary Stoddard's sister. If this is accurate, the man was already acting strangely at the time, and he might have become so obsessed with Mary that, after they broke up, he would constantly look for women who looked like her to vent his resentment. Given that Mary is still alive and Craig referred to Christina as Mary, it's plausible that, like many murderers, particularly serial killers, he had this fantasy in his mind when he committed the murder. Like the teenage girl from Vegas who survived because another customer scared the killer away, Craig most likely didn't plan his crimes, but instead gave in to impulsive behavior. Given that we know Ginger had visited the store prior to her disappearance, it's also possible that he specifically targeted victims. Craig never gave an explanation for his actions, but because Ginger's underwear was discovered around her ankles, investigators think the killings were motivated by violence against women. In any event, he will now be imprisoned for the remainder of his life after being charged with a second murder. Craig's ability to fool so many people with such ease is astounding. Mark and George, who were looking for Ginger, his own wife Cheryl, who was unaware of his secret personality, and even seasoned Vegas police officers who had seen a lot in their careers. A store owner with his wife and infant behind the counter makes you wonder where one can feel safe. He really seemed like a typical family man. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This video examines the events that occurred in the U.S. state of Washington in 2001. The mother of 8-year-old triplets, Dana Laskowski, 36, was discovered in her own home lying face down on a couch. It was a complicated mystery with multiple suspects for the police. Dana's ex-husband, her boyfriend, and other men were all investigated by detectives. However, this story had an unexpected conclusion, and Dana's family was shocked by the revelation of the truth. Dana Laskowski lived in Puyallup, Washington, a charming, peaceful city with tree-lined streets and nature trails. In 2001, although Puja has a low crime rate and is a safe city, on a typical August 2001 day, police receive a disturbing call regarding one of the city's newest residents. Dana was supposed to get to work at 7:30 a.m., but she never did. She was watching 2 doctors. She is very responsible, so this was really out of the ordinary for her. The police were contacted by her employers to inquire about her well-being. The police showed up at Dana's house at 11 a.m. to check on her. There was no response when they knocked on the door. The back door was open, so they chose to enter the house even though they had checked the perimeter and the windows and saw nothing out of the ordinary. Dana was discovered by the officers under the covers on the living room couch. Her other hand was behind her back as she lay with her head resting on her arm. Sadly, she had passed away. The body was briefly examined by police to check for wounds from gunshots or stab wounds. They saw injuries on her neck, but they didn't find any of it. She had been strangled, judging by the marks. Indeed, there are crime scenes with blood stains, a victim on the ground, obvious wounds, and possibly a mess everywhere. In Dana's home, that did not occur. Nothing was broken, and there were no weapons. When police turned Dana over, she was face down on the couch. They discovered dried blood around her ears and nose, as well as bruises on her neck. Dana was strangled to death, most likely by her own scarf, according to the medical examiner's ruling. In order to try to identify the murderer, police searched for any trace evidence, DNA, bodily fluids, or other items. Dana's body was in an awkward position on the couch. She wrapped one arm behind her back. She was in a face-down position. This indicated that she and the offender had engaged in combat. The person who did this was strong enough to overcome someone who was actually struggling for her life. It was clear from the facts that the offender was powerful. Dana was not killed, as evidenced by the abrasions on her elbows and knees on the sofa. Blood traces were discovered on the carpet in the living room after forensics applied luminol to it. This meant Dana had been killed on the ground. After that, the murderer picked her up, laid her down on the couch, and wrapped her in a blanket. Investigators hypothesized that the murderer was attempting to comfort Dana. In this instance, the fact that she was wrapped in a blanket might suggest that the offender was experiencing regret or guilt. It's possible that the murderer had feelings for Dana. The house wasn't broken into by a random burglar. When searching for suspects, it's critical to consider the possibility that this person knew her. Important information was obtained by the police following the autopsy. Detectives started interviewing neighbors, and one of them claimed to have heard a woman's screams coming from around 1 a.m. This gave police their first idea of the time frame. The medical examiner was able to estimate that Dana had been dead for a few hours before police arrived and had most likely died during the night or early morning hours of that day. Dana was probably dead by 7:30 a.m. because she had not shown up for work. Following the conclusion that Dana was murdered between 1 and 7:30 in the morning, the investigation probed further into her life in an effort to identify potential suspects. Dana was the mother of 8-year-old triplets who lived with their father, Steve, her spouse. The police learned that she had recently separated from him at the time of her death. There were more possible suspects among those Dana might have invited into her home because she had begun a new life and made new friends. The people Dana worked for as a nanny mentioned a man named Adam who started stalking her, so detectives contacted her employers to find out if any of the people she was dating had disturbed her. Adam, a cable company employee, was working at Dana's house after she recently moved. He asked Dana out on a date after finishing the work. He kept trying to spend the evening with her, but she refused. Adam refused to accept no from her, and his actions eventually started to terrify Dana. She mentioned gifts, flowers, and notes left on the door, as well as incessant messages from him that didn't stop. These behaviors suggested obsessive, domineering, and irate behavior that might make Adam think about committing a crime. Police discovered that Dana had threatened to hold Adam accountable if she were to suffer any harm. Adam became the main suspect and was in the spotlight. Despite everything, his actions and potential motivation appeared to be strong evidence of guilt. Adam denied any role in Dana's demise. The police conducted a thorough investigation of his surroundings while he was being questioned. They looked through his work locker and his car, but they didn't find anything unusual. When questioned about his whereabouts, Adam acted aggressively and insisted on his innocence. Adam stated that he stayed at home with friends the night of the murder. His statements were verified by a review of his phone records. As a result, he was placed lower on the investigation's list of suspects, forcing the police to focus on other individuals. A phone number written fluently in pen on Dana's hand was the tiny but crucial piece of evidence that investigators concentrated on. They looked up the number and found that it belonged to Julian, a 35-year-old man. The importance of the phone number to Dana was evident from the fact that it was written in pen on her hand. To learn why Julian's number was inscribed on Dana's hand, detectives located him and asked him to come in for interrogation. Their suspicions were aroused by his unwillingness to provide a cogent response, which led them to investigate his relationship with Dana further. Julian acknowledged under duress that he was close to Dana, despite the fact that she was seeing his best friend Matt. Detectives started to question whether Julian could have been the murderer after this discovery, but when his alibi was examined, it was discovered that witnesses and establishment employees had verified that he was at the bar from 10:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. on the night of the murder. Julian was thus disqualified as the murderer by his alibi. The detectives began to question whether Matt could have committed the crime after discovering that Dana was having an affair with his friend. Romantic relationships have the power to arouse our emotions, and although it may not be immediately apparent to everyone, out-of-control feelings are frequently the root cause of such crimes. Personal intimacy is frequently the cause of crimes of this kind. Matt, Dana's romantic partner, was immediately elevated to the level of suspicion as a result. Investigators examined Dana and Matt's relationship more thoroughly after receiving Julian's information. The asymmetry of feelings was clear. Dana believed she had allowed Matt into her life, but Matt was blazing with passion for her. Lacked such intense emotion. According to phone records, Dana and Matt were in constant contact the night of the murder, with calls taking place between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. As a biker who abused illegal substances and was able to confront multiple men at once, Matt was described by Dana's friends as being abrasive and rude, all of which made him an obvious suspect. Investigators found that Matt lived close to Vancouver, Canada. While looking into Dana Laskowski, however, this did not absolve him of suspicion. In a couple of hours, he could have driven from his house to Dana's. When asked, Matt claimed that he was not involved in the crime because he had intended to meet Dana but was stopped at the border due to issues with his documents. His alibi was confirmed. Investigators asked Matt for any information that could help solve Dana's murder after he was exonerated of any suspicion. According to Matt, he had called Dana the night of the murder and observed that she appeared uneasy during their chat, which may indicate that someone was present in the house with her. Matt surmised that the unidentified individual might have been Steve, Dana's ex-husband. Dana had spent a portion of her life with Steve, so it was obvious that she needed to talk to him. Her triplets were his children. Breaking up is a tough experience, and depending on the situation, it can cause anger that can turn into murder. Maybe Steve decided to commit a crime because he was so furious after Dana left him. He might have committed murder out of passion, jealousy, or rage, all of which needed to be taken into account. When investigators started looking into Steve's identity, they discovered that he had given Dana a life insurance policy, which expanded the pool of potential explanations for what transpired to include financial ones. When Steve was brought to the police station to be questioned about his relationship with Dana, he seemed unusually distant and withdrawn, seen in his feelings. His emotions seemed to have been smothered. Another suspicious detail was discovered by the detectives during the interview. Steve's knees were abrasive, just like Dana's elbows and knees. Investigators thought that on the night of the murder, there might have been a disagreement between the two. Steve explained that he had sustained the abrasions on his knees while playing baseball when detectives questioned him about them, but according to one of the detectives there, who was a real baseball expert, those kinds of injuries were not typical of the sport. Steve was even more anxious after that, but did he have a chance to murder Dana? Steve responded that he was at home, 5 hours away from Puyallup, when asked where he was on the night of the murder. The following morning, he said, he put the children to bed, filled up the gas tank, and drove to a nearby campground. His explanation was intriguing. The triplets' absence from Dana's home the night she passed away could have been a coincidence, but it could also indicate that Steve had prearranged the entire situation. It took 10 hours to travel back and forth between Steve's and Dana's homes. If Steve had gone to Dana's house, investigators realized, he would undoubtedly need to stop at a gas station, so they gave careful thought to the possibility that he could have put the kids to bed, driven to Puyallup, committed the crime, and driven back. They looked into locations where he might have refilled up with gas and went back his potential path. Investigators removed Steve as a suspect after reviewing surveillance footage and examining areas of the road where his car might have been spotted. They were unable to find any concrete proof that Steve had made the trip. The investigation hit an impenetrable wall after all suspects were ruled out, which caused great frustration. The fact that Dana's body was covered in blankets seemed particularly strange, a behavior that amply demonstrated the unusual nature of the perpetrator. The investigators had reached a point where they had no viable suspect or explanation for the nature of the crime. In light of this, the police made the decision to enlist the FBI in the inquiry. Because the local police lacked the requisite experience to identify such specific signs, the investigators sought the FBI specialist's assistance in creating a psychological profile of the potential offender. After carefully examining the case, the FBI concluded that the crime was likely committed impulsively and in a fit of rage, revealing a disordered personality. The person who was in Dana's home that fateful night, according to experts, had no intention of killing her. They probably knew one another, spoke, and then he attacked in a fit of rage. The search had to be expanded after the police had already looked at the ex-husband, the boyfriend, and even the stalker. This crime was committed by someone. It was unclear who made the decision to expand the search for suspects in the Dana Laskowski case in light of fresh FBI information. Police were now searching for someone who could have lost control if provoked. Detectives examined the video footage from Dana's funeral in an effort to find fresh evidence. Finding out who was there and how people acted on this day of mourning was essential. It was crucial to observe who attended Dana's funeral and who did not, both from a psychological perspective. Given that most murders are carried out by someone the victim knew, it is possible that the murderer was one of these individuals. It's possible that the murderer attended the funeral because it would have been suspicious to skip it. However, how did he respond to that circumstance? Did anything have the potential to reveal him? The police discovered an entry in the guest book that caught them off guard. His loved ones wrote that they missed Dana and were shocked by her passing, expressing their sorrow over the loss. However, Amanda, Dana's niece's entry was especially noteworthy. "I apologize for not being the best niece," she wrote. "It's been 34 days since I broke free from addiction. You are the reason for this." Amanda was characterized by some family members as a wild and erratic young lady. According to what was written, Amanda had overcome her addiction following Dana's passing. She also did it for Dana's benefit, which said two crucial things. Her love for her aunt was the primary factor, but it also revealed that she felt bad about her death for whatever reason, which was important because it raised the possibility that she was involved in Dana's demise. Dana was a compassionate, kind individual. Dana loved her family, and in an effort to keep her niece, Amanda 17, out of trouble, she would often let her stay with her. Amanda was a frequent runaway from home. Because Amanda was a reliable adult who was always there to support them through any problems at home, Amanda and her friends would frequently visit Dana's house. The detectives looked at Amanda to talk about the circumstances surrounding her aunt's death. They had scheduled a meeting with her. Amanda disclosed that she and Dana had been like mother and daughter. She and her friends had always had the support of their aunt. They were teenagers with unstable home lives who spent time in the park and associated illegal substances and alcohol with their future. All of them had just finished high school, but they had no clear plans for the future. Dana was attempting to establish a secure location that Amanda and her friends could visit day or night. As a result, when investigators questioned Amanda about Dana's murder, the back door of her home was always left open at night. She gave a list of those who had visited the house, naming Zane in particular. "He was a strong man with a violent temper," she said. Then Amanda revealed something even more unsettling. She described how she had once been beaten by Zane. He threw her on the couch and started acting aggressively. He would try to hit on her hard and she would push him away and ask him why. Zane merely chuckled at this, displaying his strength and beauty, as though he was taking pleasure in the situation. The detectives made the decision to examine Zane more closely and search the databases. Zane was a suspect due to his criminal history of fighting and dealing illegal substances. To find out more about Zane, one of the detectives got in touch with his young informant. In their meeting, he talked about Dana's murder and recommended Zane as a potential suspect. But according to the informant, Zane was not the one who killed Dana. Emily, a young woman from Amanda's group, was the murderer. Emily Lauenborg, a 17-year-old drug user, lived close to Dana's home. Emily and Amanda had a close relationship. They might have even been best friends. After hearing the story, the detective started to question its authenticity. He couldn't believe that Emily, a 5'2" girl who was frail, could strangle a 36-year-old mother of 3. The informant responded that she was no longer the frail girl she had been. She had matured and gained muscle. Because she enjoyed wrestling men, she was known as the mutant. Emily wasn't your usual suspect, but as the investigation progressed, It became clear that she was the strongest of the problematic teenagers, impressing everyone, including the guys, with her physical prowess and wanting arm wrestling and even regular wrestling. Emily was taken to the station by the detectives to be questioned about her potential role in Dana's murder. After placing her hands on the table, Emily threw back her head and frantically looked from side to side before leaning forward and angrily telling her that she had been slandered. Emily was asked by the police where she was when Dana was killed. Emily and Amanda both stated that they were present at the party when the crime was committed. But around midnight, Amanda and Emily left the party, and the police were able to track them down. Consequently, they could have arrived at Dana's residence by 1 in the morning. Everything suggested that they were concealing something and were most likely involved in the crime. However, what had actually occurred? Was Emily responsible for the murder? The police were able to secure a search warrant for Emily's rented room because of mounting circumstantial evidence against her. Her private journal was one of the things confiscated. It had the usual entries of a 17-year-old girl, but it quickly disclosed surprising information. A wish list that included the desire to murder someone and escape punishment was one of the entries. Emily expresses her anger towards Amanda in a different entry, stating that she wants to strangle Amanda in the same manner that she strangled her aunt. Emily's guilt was confirmed by this startling discovery. The murder, Dana's strangling, and the intention to potentially strangle Amanda in a similar way were all described in the diaries. Crucially, detectives had not yet made public the news that Dana had strangled to death when they discovered Emily's diary. This further suggested that Emily was to blame for Dana's ordeal. Amanda was questioned by detectives once more and was accused of lying about the night her aunt was killed. They questioned why she had deceived everyone. After all, Emily stated that she wanted money and that she wasn't there under duress. Amanda couldn't stand it any longer and told the detectives everything she knew before they even got to Dana's house. Dana woke up as they walked into the living room and heard a noise. The sight of them startled her. Dana responded that she didn't have any money when they told her they needed it. Emily, however, was not happy with that response and asked Dana for money once more. Emily was gently nudged in the direction of the exit when Dana asked them to leave. Emily didn't like it though, and she wasn't going to put up with it. In front of Amanda, she launched an attack on Dana and strangled her. Emily refused to listen to Amanda's cries for her to stop. The fact that Amanda did nothing but watch Emily kill her aunt suggests that she either feared Emily or that it happened so fast that she was likely unaware of what she was seeing. Amanda's scream, not Dana's, was heard by a neighbor at 1 in the morning when Dana was killed. Emily covered Dana's body with a blanket and placed it on the couch. Before they left, they took what little money Dana had. Emily took a brief break to get a black shirt out of Dana's closet. Emily wore that exact shirt when she attended Dana's funeral. It was her display of power and authority. Motive was the question that the investigators were struggling with. Emily had expressed her anger to her friends about Amanda's constant abandonment of her for her aunt. Given their close relationship, Emily might have killed Dana in order to fully control Amanda. However, Amanda was given a plea deal and would not be imprisoned for her involvement in Dana's murder. After much deliberation, investigators decided that Amanda was needed as a witness because she had witnessed the murder and would have the right to remain silent if she were charged with a crime. As a result, Amanda became a witness and gave information about what transpired that fateful night. It was the vital data that the authorities required. However, because of Emily's unremarkable size, prosecutors were unsure they could convince a jury of her guilt and allowed her to enter a guilty plea to the lesser charge of manslaughter. After being convicted and serving 5.5 years in prison, Emily Lollenborg was released in 2008. She later moved back to Puyallup, changed her name, got married, and had kids. Locals will undoubtedly be concerned about Emily's freedom to roam the streets. Like serial killers who wear mementos of their crimes, she was dressed in the victim's clothing, having already killed once and never regretting it at the funeral. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today, we'll examine what happened in Norris City, Illinois. Jacob Wheeler, 22, and his girlfriend Jessica Evans, 17, went fishing in the small Wabash River. Their families have been unable to get in touch with them, and they have not gone back home. All residents of Norris City followed the investigation after police were alerted to the couple's disappearance that same day, but sadly, there was no happy ending to the tale. All the locals were shocked by what transpired. Southern Illinois is a patchwork of fertile farmland and thick forests that stretches between Kentucky and Missouri. With a population of just over 1,000, the area is dotted with small villages like White County and Norris City, which make it an excellent place to raise children due to its small size. Hunting and other outdoor pursuits are popular. There are many locations where fishing is popular. Before summer break at school began in 2017, Jessica Evans, then 22 years old, met Jacob Wheeler, who had just moved across the street to live at his brother's house. Jessica and her mother, Chris, lived in a comfortable home. After meeting at a party and striking up a conversation, they fell in love. After 3 years of service in Iraq, Jacob was a quiet country boy trying to rebuild his life. Chris, Jessica's mother, wasn't overly concerned about the fact that Jacob was 5 years older than Jessica. She had faith in him. Jessica requested permission from her mother on August 26, 2012, to take Jacob fishing at night in a popular location on the small Wabash River. At first, Chris was opposed to the idea, but after Jessica persuaded her, he agreed. She warned her daughter not to spend too much time out. On a nearby street lived Megan, Jessica's older sister, and her son Miles. Jessica had to watch her son at 5 a.m. the following day, while Megan had to leave for work. Chris, Jessica's mother, reminded her that she needed to return home by 5 a.m. before Jessica left to go fishing. Although Jessica had no way of knowing that this fishing trip would be her final one, she responded that she remembered that and would be at her sister's house by then. Jessica was heading to bed when Chris called her just before midnight to check on her. At 5 o'clock the following morning, Chris discovers that her youngest daughter has not returned home, despite Jessica's assurances that she was all right and that she and Jacob were nearly finished fishing and would be home shortly. Jessica was not known for being late, especially when she knew she had to watch her nephew. Jessica didn't answer when Chris picked up her cell phone and began calling her daughter. Chris's text messages also went unanswered. Chris knew right away that something wasn't right. She was certain that she would have alerted Jessica if her plans had changed. When Chris arrived at Jacob's house, his brother Jeremy informed him that Jacob had also not returned home. By 9 in the morning, Jessica's family was starting to worry, but Jeremy wasn't concerned because he knew Jacob could take care of himself. Chris feared they were stranded somewhere or that Jacob's pickup had broken down. Chris finally called the White County Sheriff's Office after the couple had not been seen for 12 hours. Sheriff Doug Mayer wasn't overly worried when he got the call about the missing couple on Sunday night while he was lounging around his house. Maybe Jacob and Jessica had escaped, he thought. He needed to know where they had disappeared to, but he assumed they were safe. In order for the phone company to track down Jessica's cell phone, the sheriff chose to execute a warrant to search it, which could take hours. Meanwhile, as instructed by the family, the sheriff's deputies went to the fishing spot where Jessica and Jacob were expected to be. There were only gravel roads leading to the remote location. A 50-foot overgrown trail led the deputies to a popular fishing location. There were clear indications that someone had visited. Although there were a few packages, there were no indications of any criminal activity or problems. Although the campfire had been extinguished, the area was extremely clean. Jacob had left his pickup truck behind. The sheriff had trusted his instincts about the young couple thus far. He didn't initially think that something negative had occurred. He did believe that they had most likely traveled somewhere voluntarily. Ultimately, Jessica's cell phone carrier provided the records to the sheriff's deputies. Attempting to track the phone and determine which tower it was closest to was a great way to locate them. They discovered that a tower in the campground area was the source of the signal. That was the implication. Jessica was somewhere close to where she and Jacob had gone fishing, and her phone was still on. The sheriff was not prepared for it at all. If Jessica and Jacob are still alive, why aren't they returning their calls if the couple had just fled? The news that Jessica and Jacob were missing spread swiftly throughout Norris City, raising concerns among the locals as investigators started to worry that the two were stranded somewhere, gravely hurt, or worse. When the sheriff's office discovered that Jessica's cell phone was still in the area where the couple had gone night fishing, they became concerned that something horrible had happened. At dawn the following day, officers from the White County Sheriff's Office returned to the fishing site with a platoon of volunteers and neighboring law enforcement agencies. The search party set out to look for any sign of Jacob and Jessica, and their families also joined in the search, but after 3 hours of searching, they found nothing. Jessica, Jacob, and the pickup truck were nowhere to be seen. The pickup had to be there, though, even if something were to happen to Jacob and Jessica. However, what if they abandoned the phones and fled? They would eventually leave an electronic trail if they did flee together. While the bank statements showed nothing noteworthy, the police checked their bank cards to see if there had been any payments. However, one clue was found in Jessica's phone records. Investigators were able to identify the number's owner after Jessica reportedly had another phone conversation shortly after the midnight call from her mother, which occurred at around 12:30 a.m. on Sunday night. Jessica was conversing with Ron Woodison, a young man. The police knew that name because Ron had previously run afoul of the law. This in and of itself raised suspicions that he might have been involved, so they decided to speak with Ron and find out the specifics of that conversation. When he met with the sheriff's deputies, they asked him to describe the last time he had spoken to Jessica. Eventually, he acknowledged that he had called her in the middle of the night. He mentioned that he had attended the party and that some other people had also been present. Ron stated that he had attempted to invite Jessica to the party by calling her. Ron was just informed by Jessica that she was occupied with fishing. He had been told not to call Jessica by Jacob when he reached for the phone, and Ron claims that they had a rather heated exchange. Jacob was mostly to blame. The fact that Ron had called his girlfriend really annoyed him. Jacob was quite irritated by his call. The other partygoers' names were noted by the sheriff's deputies, who also verified Ron's alibi and essentially attested to the fact that he remained there following that phone call. As the weary search team members were ready to head home at the end of the day without discovering anything, one of Jacob's friends, using his ATV, discovered a pickup truck in the woods. Jacob and Jessica were fishing 2 miles away from the pickup, which was parked in the woods behind an old deserted farmhouse. Jacob had the pickup. It was obvious that a horrible event had occurred. A woman's body was in the back of the truck. Her head had been shot twice. Her condition was another reason to be concerned. She had some clothes on. Investigators were immediately convinced that there had been more than a murder when they discovered some of her clothing on the ground near the car. In a community like this one, it wasn't necessary for the victim to have identification because some of the investigators had known Jessica for their entire lives, and they had just discovered her. Almost 36 hours after Jessica failed to show up to watch her nephew, everything changed in that instant. She was shot and found dead in Jacob's abandoned pickup truck by the sheriff's office. Given that she was nearly completely naked, it was clear that she had intercourse with a man prior to her passing and opposed it. Authorities hoped the coroner would be able to apprehend the offenders if that was the case. While police searched the area surrounding the pickup truck for evidence, they were fortunate to find DNA. It is clear that Jessica's 2 head wounds were consistent with the 222 caliber shell casings. It was clear that Jessica had been shot where the pickup truck was parked because the 2 shell casings were discovered on the right side of the vehicle, next to a sizable blood stain. Investigators started looking into Jacob's pickup. The oddest thing was that Jacob wasn't there, even though it was packed with personal belongings and fishing equipment. When the police searched, they found a clue. They discovered blood inside the pickup truck's driver's side cab. Samples of blood were sent for DNA analysis. They had to find Jacob, and they had to determine who owned it. The police couldn't help but wonder if Jacob was the person who had shot Jessica, or if he was just another victim. In an attempt to locate Jacob, police kept searching the area. They had to think of him more as a suspect at the time. Doubts weren't limited to the investigators. There were some members of the community who thought Jacob was involved in Jessica's situation. Many conjectured that Jacob had been trained to kill after years of service in the army. Maybe it was Ron's late-night phone call that triggered Jacob. When Jacob believed he was going to lose Jessica, investigators started to wonder what kind of mood he might have been in. The police secured a search warrant for Jacob's brother's home the day after Jessica's body was found. They made a significant discovery, but they were unable to locate Jacob, who they assumed was hiding in the house. One of the firearms was absent from his collection, which investigators discovered. The brother of Jeremy Jacob clarified that there was no reason to be alarmed. All his brother was doing was getting ready for a fishing trip. It was nothing out of the ordinary. When investigators learned that the missing firearm was a .22 caliber, which matched the shell casings discovered at the crime scene, they became concerned. Jacob's family, however, thought he had nothing to do with the crime. They had no doubt that if Jessica had been in danger, Jacob would have given his life to save her. The hunt for Jacob Wheeler became a massive operation as the week went on. Search teams were assembled by police officers from multiple counties, and every effort was made to locate him. The search was conducted using canine services, and an aircraft was launched for surveillance. A $2,000 reward was offered by the White County Crime Suppression Unit for information that would result in Jacob's apprehension and arrest. There was some interest in the cash reward, and tips started coming in to the sheriff's office. Out of all the tips, one particularly noteworthy one claimed that Jacob had been spotted at a gas station. According to a worker at the gas station 12 miles from the scene of Jessica's death, he thought Jacob had purchased a pack of cigarettes. He was wearing a camouflage hooded sweatshirt on Sunday night, approximately one day after he and Jessica vanished. The gas station employee recalled that when the man took money out of his wallet, he also found an ID card inside, which he thought was in Jacob Wheeler's name. Because of this, Jacob was clearly the most likely suspect in Jessica's incident, and the likelihood that he was evading capture increased over time. The gas station where Jacob was allegedly spotted was visited by investigators. They noticed a suspicious man in the surveillance footage. He avoided looking at the camera and wore a hooded sweatshirt that covered his face. Although it was suspicious and the night was too hot for a warm jacket, it was difficult to confirm that it was Jacob. The man hurried off to buy cigarettes. The man's face was not visible in the gas station's surveillance footage, but a second camera outside captured him boarding a female driver's vehicle. One of the sheriff's deputies recognized the woman, and they drove right to her home. While speaking with investigators, they noticed that the vehicle seen on the gas station's CCTV footage was parked close to the residence. Although the woman acknowledged that she had driven the man to the gas station, she denied that it was Jacob Wheeler. It was her boyfriend, she claimed. They were extremely disappointed when they first saw her boyfriend. It was someone who resembled Jacob Wheeler, but it wasn't him. In the video, the unidentified man is a dead end. Jacob was still the center of the police's attention. The detectives suspected that his brother Jeremy was hiding him and were certain he was still alive. His brother and father were certain that Jacob couldn't have killed Jessica, so they searched his house at night in an attempt to catch him off guard. But even after a second search, they couldn't find any evidence that he was home. Wheeler wanted his son's name cleared. It was difficult because he was certain that he was searching for Jacob's body rather than his own. Harold, Jacob's father, called Sheriff Meyer 6 days after the disappearance to inform him that he had found something that everyone else had missed. Just a quarter mile from Jacob and Jessica's campsite, he claimed to have spotted what appeared to be auto parts in a wooded area. When investigators looked into this information, they did discover some auto parts. These were components that were fastened to the pickup's fenders. It was definitely not Jacob Wheeler's pickup truck, but there was damage to the trees in the area where they found these parts, indicating that someone had driven the pickup into the woods and between the trees, damaging the vehicle. The investigators had no other leads and were unsure if the find was related to the crime, but it was unquestionably of interest. There was a serial number on one of the parts. The police were able to identify the exact type of pickup truck by looking it up online. Once more, locating this truck in a small city cannot be difficult. A man who drives a car like this was known to one of the sheriff's deputies. It was White County native Danny Costin, a 36-year-old electrician. Could he have been a part of such a violent crime, though? Danny was never one to cause trouble. His criminal history was clean. He lived in White County and was easily located. Investigators made the decision to speak with Danny at his place of employment. In the parking lot was his pickup truck. The parts discovered in the woods matched the truck's extensive damage. Sheriff Meyer questioned Danny while the investigator examined the pickup truck. He inquired about his pickup truck's damage. Danny clarified that he had attempted to fish on the small Wabash River but struggled to get the boat started due to his extreme drunkenness. He remembered the date, but not much else about the evening. It was around 1 in the morning on the night that Jacob and Jessica went fishing. and he reported that during his entire stay in that section of the river, he never saw anyone else. In the meantime, researchers made a significant finding. In the rear of Danny's pickup truck, they discovered a significant amount of blood. When they told him about it, he appeared taken aback. The sheriff advised Danny that this would be a good time to tell him anything he wanted to. Analysis revealed that the blood in the back of Danny's pickup truck was human blood, despite Danny's claim that he witnessed Jacob shoot Jessica twice while he was in the woods that evening. Danny was taken to the police station and subjected to additional interrogation by investigators. He claimed to be intoxicated. He saw Jacob and Jessica when he descended to the small Wabash River. He was alone with Jessica because Jacob had gone into the woods. According to Danny, Jessica allegedly began approaching him on her own. He claimed that he and Jessica drove off in his truck and parked behind an old deserted farmhouse 2 miles away. They allegedly made intimate consenting contact. Then, as Danny said, Jacob discovered them in the dark. After he and Jessica got into a fight, Jacob shot Jessica. Danny claims that he was afraid when he saw Jacob approaching and managed to grab him, which led to a struggle between them. The gun went off somehow, wounding Jacob. According to Danny, the shot was unintentional. Panic set in. He loaded Jacob into his pickup truck. He concealed the body where no one could find it because he was worried that no one would believe him when he claimed it was self-defense. Danny gave a detailed account of where he had left Jacob's body. Danny's story was disbelieved by the police. Jessica didn't seem likely to do that. Although Danny's account of Jessica accompanying him and Jacob unexpectedly appearing didn't make much sense, they now knew that Danny had shot Jacob, proving that Jacob's family was correct all along. Danny Costin was taken to jail after being arrested. The investigators then proceeded to the location where Danny claimed to have left Jacob's body. They had to venture a bit farther into the woods because it was a dirt road. They searched for 6 days before locating Jacob, who had been shot in the head. The evidence they discovered did not support Danny Costin's account of what transpired that evening. The driver's seat and the door of Jacob's pickup were covered in blood, and it was Jacob's blood. Danny's story simply didn't fit it. He claimed that after Jacob killed Jessica, they got into a fight in the woods, and Jacob was accidentally shot and killed. According to what Danny had previously said, he loaded the body into the back of his own pickup truck and drove it to a faraway place. So where did Jacob's pickup truck's interior contain blood? After being reinterrogated, Danny Costin agreed to tell the truth after being made aware of discrepancies in his testimony. He claims that the woods were too dense when he attempted to drive his truck to the water that evening in order to launch the boat. He was also inebriated. He attempted to enlist the aid of Jacob and Jessica. When Jacob realized he was intoxicated, he advised against it. Then Danny requested assistance from the couple to get home. Jacob concurred. Danny climbed into the back of Jacob's pickup truck after he and Jessica got inside. For some reason, he chose to use his .22 caliber pistol. He got out of the truck's back and left. Through the downed window, the driver shot Jacob in the head. Everything took place in front of Jessica. She began to scream out of terror. Then he pulled Jacob out of the truck, Danny said. He swore under interrogation that he had no idea why he killed Jacob or what he was doing. Danny was then informed by Jessica that she would stop at nothing to prevent him from killing her. Danny Costin was questioned by the sheriff about whether Jessica had promised to have sex with him in return for his allowing her to live. Costin answered, "She promised to follow my instructions." He went to a remote location. He basically took Jessica's attempt to protect herself as an invitation to have a personal relationship with him. He did it in Jacob's pickup truck's back. Then he pulled out a gun and shot Jessica, even though she begged for her life. "I don't know why I did it," Costin said. He threw both his and Jacob's guns out the window after loading Jessica's body into the back of Jacob's pickup truck and driving his own vehicle to Wayne County to conceal Jacob's body. Neither gun was ever found by the police. Danny Costin entered a not guilty plea when he appeared in court on September 4, 2012. An appeals court dismissed his attempt to retract his testimony, arguing that he was not informed of his rights prior to being questioned. Police had ample evidence to support Danny Costin's confession, and video recordings of the interrogation verified that Danny was informed of his rights. His DNA was found on Jessica's body, and his truck contained Jacob's blood. In January 2014, a jury convicted Danny Costin's girlfriend, Candace Brown, age 31, of lying to the police during the preliminary investigation. She gave Costin a fictitious alibi. On August 20, 2013, Danny Costin was found guilty, and Brown was sentenced to 60 days in jail, 30 months probation, 100 hours of community service, and a payment of various court costs and fines. He received a 53-year prison sentence. Judge Tom Foster felt that Costin should have received a more severe sentence, but he acknowledged that he was constrained by the state and defense's agreement. According to the court, "You killed these two individuals. There is no pardon or justification for that, not in this world or any other." According to the judge, Costin consented to forgo a jury trial in return for fewer charges and a lighter sentence in the event of a conviction. Harold Wheeler, Jacob's father, stated that he never thought his son, who was named by law enforcement as a person of interest in Jessica Evans' death, was capable of committing such a crime. Foster claimed that the court only accepted the agreement because the victims' families had agreed to it following the hearing. "I was certain that he would never act in this manner. On Sunday, I began searching for him and I never gave up." He claimed that Costin was an acquaintance who lived approximately a quarter-mile away from the Wheeler home and that it was surprising that he was arrested for the killings. "I've had a beer with him while we were sitting at his campsite." Harold Wheeler, clearly in pain, remarked of Costin, "He's been in my house." And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The video you just watched was recorded right before Christopher Greger realized that the police had finally discovered his son's whereabouts. Christopher's life was forever altered by a single, terrible, and heartbreaking secret recording. When Corey was brought to the hospital in critical condition, the police were called. Corey's father had darker plans for his own son, but Corey only wanted to please him and keep him happy. The community would be shocked when all of Christopher's sinister secrets were exposed. A tragedy happened on April 2, 2021, a few days after the unsettling video of Corey running by himself on the treadmill was released. Around 4 p.m., Corey's father, 31-year-old Christopher Greger, found his son completely still and unconscious. Corey was taken right away to Southern Ocean County Medical Center in Stafford the next day, where he was examined by qualified medical professionals. The fight to save the child started inside the room. The doctors worked quickly and diligently, but Corey's condition deteriorated. He had a seizure during a CT scan, which made his already precarious condition even worse. At 5:03 p.m., Corey died in spite of all efforts to save him. April 2, 2021. However, something even more horrifying was about to be discovered by the doctors. They found multiple bruises on Corey's body as they examined him. Additionally, the treadmill video alluded to a sinister possibility and nearly provided an explanation for how such a tragic event could have occurred. The entire community would be shocked by the shocking information that the investigation would reveal. However, the case took another unexpected turn. Christopher, Corey's father, called Child Protection Services immediately after the doctors declared him dead. He stated that Corey had been with his mother, Brianna Micciolo, on April 1, 2021. She soon found herself at the center of an expanding investigation, but some information about his parents' upbringing would eventually point to a dark trend. The story started in 2014, when Brianna Miccioli, Corey's mother, became pregnant with Corey. Christopher Greger was the father. At first, Christopher didn't even know Corey existed. Authorities first discovered Christopher as Corey's potential father when Brianna applied for state assistance. A paternity test in 2018 verified that Corey's father was in fact Corey's father. The parents' dispute over custody began at this point. They had never been married, so they weren't divorced, but they both wanted to be in charge of raising Corey. Although it took almost a year for Christopher to start seeing Corey, he began to abide by child support orders as the custody dispute progressed. Following a court settlement, Christopher was given custody of Corey during the week. In the end, they resided in Monroe with Christopher's parents, but he eventually moved to Barnegat. At first, Brianna supported this choice because she thought it was crucial for Corey to have a relationship with his father in order to give his life a sense of completion. However, this choice would permanently alter her life. Brianna became aware of some oddities as Corey started to spend more time with his father. Brianna once saw that Corey had a busted lip when he came home from his father's custody. Christopher said it had happened by accident during a soccer match when she questioned him about it. It would not be long before the terrible reality of the situation was revealed, but it wasn't the only instance. Brianna discovered injuries on Corey's face, arms, and legs shortly after he returned from Christopher's house around Halloween 2019. Additionally, there was a noticeable slap mark on Corey's face. Corey was too afraid to respond when Brianna questioned him about it, but Brianna soon discovered that Christopher was the one torturing his own son. She made the decision to act to protect him because she knew something was seriously amiss. She informed the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, DCPP, and the police about Christopher's behavior, but the authorities did nothing about the complaints. Despite Brianna's best efforts, nothing was done and the case was closed. This was only the beginning of a trend in which Brianna's concerns were disregarded by the authorities. Christopher accused Brianna of drug addiction and demanded full custody of Corey as soon as she complained. By March 2020, the court had given Christopher sole custody of Corey, leaving Brianna with only visitation rights. Brianna persisted even after losing the fight for custody of Corey. She recorded several cases of Corey's body having bite marks and inexplicable bruises. She repeatedly warned the State Child Protective Services caseworker, but her requests were largely ignored. Corey frequently had fingerprints on his arms and legs when he got home, and once he had blood accumulating at the corners of his eyes. Years went by with the authorities taking no meaningful action, and his father's abuse persisted. Christopher was still in complete custody, in spite of Brianna's protests. But on April 1, 2021, a devastating discovery altered everything. When Corey visited with his mother, he told her about the treadmill incident. He disclosed that he had been made to run at an abnormally high speed by his father weeks prior. The events of that day were also captured on CCTV. On March 20, 2021, Christopher and Corey were seen on camera entering the Atlantic Heights Clubhouse Fitness Center. Even after Corey fell several times, the video showed Christopher pushing him onto the treadmill and then raising the difficulty levels. However, this was not even the most devastating aspect. Christopher thought his son needed a lot of exercise because he was overweight. Christopher's abuse of his son was evident. Brianna acted right away after being horrified by Corey's remarks regarding his father. She reported the abuse to authorities the next day and requested emergency custody of Corey. However, there was yet another disappointment. The family court judge rejected Brianna's request, despite her urgent pleas, claiming that Corey was not in immediate danger. They had no idea that danger was lurking around every corner. But that same day, April 1, 2021, in the afternoon, Brianna took Corey to a nearby hospital to have his bruises examined. After examining Corey, the doctors told Brianna that he was fine despite a few bruises on his body. As a result, he was released at around 1 in the morning. On the same day, Christopher insisted on taking Corey back, even though Brianna wanted to keep him with her. Everything changed at approximately 9 a.m. on April 2, 2021. While in Christopher's care, Corey became very sick and unresponsive. Tragically, Corey was declared dead a few hours after Christopher hurried him to the hospital on April 2 at approximately 4 p.m. Christopher's response stunned everyone even more. Christopher held Brianna accountable for Corey's demise. He had recently lost his son, so it seemed strange that he was assigning blame so soon after the tragedy. However, this was only the start. The story was about to take more turns. After learning of Corey's passing, Christopher chose to spend 3 months out of state rather than grieving for his son right away. He once more tried to place the blame on Brianna, Corey's mother, after the police apprehended him. Brianna was devastated when she learned of her son's passing. She was overcome with grief and regret for all the choices that had resulted in Corey being placed in his father's custody, which ultimately had a terrible consequence. However, she was committed to using the legal system to secure justice for Corey. The trial to ascertain the cause of Corey Masciolo's death finally started. Christine Lento, the prosecutor, began the trial on April 30, 2024, by claiming that they had enough proof to charge Christopher with killing his son Corey. Lento asserted with assurance that Corey's death was caused by his father's ongoing abuse. However, Mario Gallucci, Christopher's lawyer, refuted these allegations by presenting Christopher as a responsible father. Gallucci maintained that the treadmill video was unrelated to Corey's demise and proposed that Corey passed away from sepsis, an infection found during a medical examination. There were conflicting views regarding Corey's cause of death, which led to a legal battle. As evidence was presented and witnesses testified, this legal battle took an intriguing turn. The case initially started to show how Christopher mistreated his son. The first witness called by the prosecutor was Corey's first-grade teacher. The teacher stated in her testimony that she frequently observed bruises on Corey's body after March 2021, when he was in his father's custody. She also noticed a discernible shift in Corey's conduct at school. He was quieter and more reclusive. The purpose of these observations was to highlight the possible abuse that Corey endured while under his father's supervision. In addition, Dr. Ye Qiaowang testified before the jury about Corey's April 1, 2021 visit with him, together with his mother. Dr. Ye Qiaowang clarified that he saw marks that indicated bleeding beneath the skin, in addition to bruises all over Corey's body, especially on his chest. Dr. Yang confirmed that he did not see sepsis symptoms when Corey was released from the hospital, when the prosecutor asked him if he did. According to this testimony, Corey's death was not caused by an infection. Additionally, according to Dr. Ye Qiaowang's testimony, Corey seemed healthy prior to his April 2, 2021 visit to his father's home, raising the possibility that something happened while Corey was in his father's custody. William Doyle, a triage nurse at Southern Ocean Medical Center, was called as a witness to provide information about Corey's condition following his visit with his father. Doyle described how he witnessed Christopher take Corey to the ER on April 2, 2021, which helped to clarify Corey's condition when he got to the hospital. When Dr. William Doyle first saw Corey, the prosecutor asked him what he noticed. Corey's serious and critical condition when he arrived at the hospital was justified by Dr. Doyle's statements. In order to refute the charges, the defense attorney asked Carolyn Gregor, Christopher's mother, to testify about the calls she got from Christopher about Corey and the reasons he made the decision to leave right away. Carolyn began by saying that she had been informed about Corey's condition. Christopher had implied that Brianna might have done something wrong to Corey, she said. She continued by saying that they began getting threatening phone calls at random, accusing Christopher of being a murderer. Christopher chose to escape because of this. Additionally, Brianna had come to their home and threatened them, according to Christopher's mother. Carolyn, however, clarified during the judge's questioning that Brianna never threatened to attack them or set fire to their home. She only clarified that she was referring to the treadmill video when she mentioned Brianna making threatening calls. Attorney Mario Gallucci also introduced Christopher's father, David Gregor, a retired New Jersey State Police officer who testified about his first encounter with Corey. The emotional side of Christopher's parents was brought to light by this testimony. When David talked about his only grandson, Corey, he was clearly emotional. David told the defense attorney that he didn't want to watch the treadmill video footage because he didn't want it to be his final recollection of Corey. He acknowledged that Christopher had mistreated Corey in the treadmill video, though. Thus, despite attorney Mario Gallucci's tenacious defense of Christopher, all the facts and assertions were deemed unfounded when prosecutor Christine Lento produced the most important piece of evidence, the manner of death, which established Christopher's guilt for his son's passing. Corey passed away from blunt impact injuries to his chest and abdomen, which included liver laceration and contusion, left pulmonary contusion, and heart laceration. These injuries in Corey's case could not have been caused intentionally by him. Certainly, it wasn't suicide. The distribution and pattern of these injuries support the idea that they were caused by someone else. Therefore, from the perspective of a medical examiner, homicide is defined as any death that is connected to the actions of another person from an epidemiological or public health perspective. According to crucial testimony from Dr. Thomas Andrew, Corey's fatal injuries resulted from blunt force trauma to his chest and abdomen, which caused a large laceration in his heart. His professional evaluation categorically categorized Corey's death as a homicide, stressing that the seriousness of these wounds suggested intentional human behavior rather than unintentional causes. He added that the forensic test revealed no evidence of a sepsis infection. However, this conflict did not stop there. One more testimony remained. Dr. Michael Baden, another forensic pathologist, gave the Ocean County jurors an opposing viewpoint. According to Dr. Baden, Corey's death was due to natural causes, such as pneumonia complications. Dr. Andrews' conclusions and interpretation were directly at odds with this testimony. Jurors in Christopher Greger's trial had to carefully consider the evidence put forth by both sides due to the case's complexity caused by the divergent expert opinions. Lento claimed that the treadmill footage that the prosecutor's office had recovered spoke for itself, notwithstanding the defense's claims that Corey passed away from natural causes like sepsis or pneumonia. That video contained all the information the jury required. The last day of judgment to decide whether Christopher was guilty or not was May 31, 2024. The jury ultimately rendered a decision after taking into account all of the evidence that was put forth by the defense and prosecutor. Christopher was convicted of endangering a child's welfare and aggravated manslaughter. The more serious murder charge against him, however, was dropped. Potential prison terms for aggravated manslaughter ranged from 10 to 30 years. Christopher might have received a life sentence, though, if he had been found guilty of murder. The courtroom was filled with a range of emotions following the jury's verdict, with some people feeling relieved and at peace, and others feeling sad and incredulous. The entire scope of Christopher's punishment would be decided at his sentencing hearing on August 20, 2024. A civil court battle also took place in the midst of the criminal proceedings. Corey's mother, Brianna Micciolo, filed a lawsuit against the DCPP, claiming that their carelessness and inaction had not shielded Corey from the abuse that finally claimed his life. With the help of advocacy organizations and those who shared her values, Brianna's efforts to effect change grew stronger. The tragic tale of Corey Micciolo serves as a reminder of children's vulnerabilities and our shared duty to protect them. However, it raises the question, did the jury make the correct choice? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This was only the start of a call in which Derek Rosa, a 13-year-old son, would divulge information so startling and unthinkable that even the experienced dispatcher would find it hard to believe what she was hearing. Officers arrived at the horrific scene within minutes. Unaware that they were going to come across one of the most unsettling cases they had ever come across, the police carried on with their investigation. Derek shockingly called 911 on October 12, 2023, to report that his mother, Irina Garcia, was hurt at their apartment in Hialeah, Florida. The most horrifying crime they could have ever envisioned began with that unsettling 911 call. Derek appeared to be experiencing intense grief during the call, as he told the authorities that his mother, Irina Garcia, had been confirmed dead. A 13-year-old son reporting the news to the dispatcher would have been a heartbreaking moment, but everyone was about to be shocked by the horrible secrets concealed behind this call. "I shared some pictures with my friends," he told the dispatcher. What images would he have been able to show his friends? Derek quickly gave the answer when he disclosed yet another startling fact that caught everyone off guard. It was shocking to hear Derek tell the dispatcher that he killed his mother. Derek's motivations are still unknown, but he was going to divulge information that would only make matters worse. The apartment was occupied by 3 people. Given that Derek and the newborn baby were in the apartment, the dispatcher recognized the urgency of the situation right away. To protect the infant, the police had to move quickly. To find out what had happened, detectives raced to the crime scene. Everyone in the area was shocked when the police arrived and took Derek into custody. Derek was standing with bloody hands and no remorse at all. Without any delay, the detectives got to work on their investigation. They found Irina lying on the bed with her newborn baby covered in blood, and they also found a pool of blood on the floor of her room. Derek had committed the heinous crime of stabbing his mother more than 40 times. After attempting to collect all of the evidence discovered in room 201, The authorities were taken aback when they came across a crucial piece of evidence that left the entire team in shock. Just before Derek dialed 911 on the evening of October 12, 2023, they first discovered the doorbell camera footage. When Irina was last seen, she was nursing her newborn child, according to the footage from the doorbell camera. A moment later, Derek showed up and hurried off. Derek asked why Irina always told him to run slowly after she told him, in Spanish, not to run too fast. Then he walked out of the apartment and then came back in. What might have caused that horrific crime? Derek might have been annoyed by his mother's worry, but the question was still unanswered. In addition to remembering Derek's 911 call exchange with the dispatcher, the detectives needed to figure out how he was carrying a weapon. Furthermore, just as he was about to reveal yet another unexpected development, the dispatcher asked if he had any weapons at home. He soon disclosed a startling reality. He acknowledged that after killing his mother, he intended to use the gun he had to end his own life. The fact that Derek had attempted self-harm shocked the detectives. It exposed his unstable mental state at the time of the murder. They were uncertain, though, whether it was the product of mental illness or a deliberate act. The video of Irina's murder was the first important piece of evidence the detectives were about to see, and they were shocked to find it. The video clearly showed Irina lying on the bed with her newborn baby gently comforting her. However, in a subsequent clip, Derek was seen standing over Irina with his hand in motion, suggesting that he'd attacked her while she was asleep. The knife that Derek claimed he used to attack his mother was also discovered by the authorities. Luckily, he didn't hurt his sister, but these pictures were sufficient proof that Derek killed his mother. In addition, he admitted that after killing his mother, he had sent 2 pictures to his online friend, one of himself and the other of his mother, who had passed away. His hand was obviously covered in blood in the picture he sent to his friend, which amply demonstrated the gravity of the situation. The revelation of a 13-year-old son who not only murdered his mother, but also dared to show pictures of the crime to someone was startling. Once the detectives gathered sufficient evidence, they became certain that something was wrong with Derek. The investigators recognized the importance of comprehending the family's history, as it could reveal information about Derek too. Without any delay, the investigators began their investigation to ascertain the precise cause of his behavior. They focused on investigating Derek's background and his family. Derek Rosa, a former model student, consistently made the honor roll and excelled academically. According to the teachers, they described him as a good boy and an intelligent one. He was very close to his mother, Irina Garcia. In the family, the one who received the most caring attention from Irina was Derek. For his emotional life, the relationship was therefore important. But when Irina became pregnant with a girl in early 2023, everything changed. The newborn's arrival somewhat altered the dynamics of the household. Derek was left feeling defeated on the sidelines as Irina instantly turned her focus to the baby. Derek was more emotionally affected by the shifts in family dynamics, which made him more shy and envious of his younger sister. According to some people involved in the case, Derek might have felt abandoned and believed that the new baby was receiving the same amount of love that his mother used to give him. Adding to the emotional strain mentioned earlier, Derek's father, Frank Ramos, was a truck driver who was often away from home due to his rigorous delivery routes. Irina had to take care of all the housework and childcare because he only came home a few times a month. Even though there were no overt signs of severe family strife, the investigators later came to the conclusion that Derek might have felt lonely and emotionally deprived as a result of the lack of a father figure and a newborn child. Derek became more and more resentful as the months went by. Over the course of the evening of October 12, 2023, it became violent. The video from the baby monitor that showed Derek standing over his mother while she slept was found by the police. This terrifying incident occurred shortly before Irina passed away. According to the police, Derek acted out of jealousy, displaced aggression, and a desire to win back his mother's affection and control over the family. The investigators felt compelled to question Derek in order to obtain a more thorough understanding. The investigators took extra care when questioning him because he was only 13 years old and might be dealing with psychological problems. Detective Gonzalez started asking Derek straightforward questions so he wouldn't feel threatened. They began by posing straightforward queries to Derek regarding his daily schedule. In order to learn more about Derek's whereabouts and mental state before the incident, the detectives immediately focused on the events of the morning of October 12. As he interacted with the authorities, Derek seemed composed and helpful, demonstrating a solid grasp of his family's dynamics. He talked about spending weekends with his stepfather, Frank Ramos, and the family didn't seem to be having any problems. After that, detectives turned their attention to what had happened that evening. Derek appeared to hesitate before answering this question when detectives asked it. Derek had been giving accurate information up until that point, but the detectives were about to ask a crucial question when he gave them an unexpected response. When the detectives asked him what weapon he used to stab his mother, he gave them an unexpected answer. Derek casually brought up the size of the murder weapon. He seemed to be casually speaking with the authorities, displaying no remorse, and he was not aware of the grave consequences of his crime. The detectives carried on their discussion. He disclosed yet another startling fact. He had stolen the gun from his stepfather's closet and tried but failed to shoot himself. They were hoping to learn more about his friend, with whom he shared the crime photos, and the conversation was going well so far. It was important to mention that he spoke with Sweden, an online friend, virtually every weekend. Additionally, Derek confided in him enough to share pictures of the crime, suggesting that they may have discussed something significant. As a result, the detectives quickly turned their attention to Derek's conversation with his friend. Detective Gonzalez noticed something on Derek's shirt just as he was about to mention the 911 call. He remained unaffected, even though the officers were appalled by the evidence of his crime on his shirt. Rather, he calmly held up his bleeding hand. Derek was clearly emotionally detached as he explained what he had done. The investigators asked the crucial question, and shortly after, the graphic depiction of Derek's crime surfaced, frightening them. It was genuinely terrifying when Derek described the crime in detail, demonstrating each stage of his assault on Irina with hand gestures. Derek was obviously fully conscious when he committed the crime. He was clearly uncomfortable when the detectives questioned him about why he killed his mother, and he quickly came up with a reason to use the restroom. Still, the investigators persisted in asking the same question. Derek asked for a lawyer after becoming uncooperative. Without Derek Rose's confession to explain his actions, the case was still being investigated. Nevertheless, detectives gathered enough evidence, such as CCTV footage, a knife found at the scene, and photos from the crime scene, to create a case. Given that Derek chose the best time and location to carry out the murder, this evidence demonstrated that he was a premeditated killer. Derek was charged with first-degree murder and made his first court appearance on October 15, 2023. He showed no remorse for the charges against him and remained emotionless and icy throughout the hearing. Derek's defense attorney asked for a postponement of the hearing, claiming that they had not yet received the state attorney's notice of intent. They also asked whether psychological factors might have been involved and talked about the part that some mental health conditions may have played. Evidence quickly refuted this, demonstrating that Derek had searched for prohibited items on Google at 6 p.m. on October 12, 2023. At 6 p.m. on October 12, he did conduct Google searches. He entered the following search terms: is a small knife good for killing? What is the best place to stab someone? And the carotid artery image diagram. This search history revealed evidence of planning, which bolstered the prosecution's claim that the act was planned rather than spontaneous. Derek was moved from the adult jail to a juvenile detention facility at the request of Derek's defense lawyers. They claimed that Derek needed a psychological test that could only be performed in a juvenile facility because of his age. The prosecution, however, disagreed, claiming that Derek's search history demonstrated premeditation and that this offense was extremely serious. But the defense also brought up his mental health problems. He had been diagnosed with ADHD by a psychologist and on the autism spectrum by another specialist. They further supported their case for Derek's placement in a juvenile detention facility by highlighting the fact that he had threatened to hurt himself. It was evident to the psychologists who examined the case that Derek's actions on that fateful night were the result of a well-thought-out plan rather than an impulse. He had planned what he was going to do because he was captured on the baby monitor above Irina. The most concerning evidence of Derek's mental illness also surfaced after the crime, when he shared a selfie and a picture of his mother's lifeless body with a friend. This conduct revealed a lack of any fundamental humanity, which is a trait frequently lacking in psychopathic people. Throughout the trial, Derek's family steadfastly supported him in spite of the overwhelming evidence against him. One particularly poignant instance was when Derek's grandmother, representing his family's steadfast support, waved at him and blew him a kiss from the courtroom. At this point, more than 50 people were shouting Derek-supporting slogans while holding banners outside the court. On November 7, 2023, the organizers presented him as an innocent teen and a former honor student. Regardless of the offense, Derek's supporters argued for his opportunity to change. A hearing regarding the admissibility of evidence was held on December 15, 2023. Citing the premeditated nature of the crime, the judge decided, after considering the facts, that Derek would continue to be held in adult custody. His supporters criticized this decision, claiming it disregarded his age and mental health conditions. Derek's defense team keeps arguing for a lighter sentence as the case progresses, claiming that life in prison without the possibility of release would be unfair to a child of his age. The trial has come to represent the complexity of juvenile justice, bringing up tough issues for society to consider. Do serious crimes committed by minors deserve life in prison, or should they be given an opportunity to change? The court will further evaluate Derek's mental health and determine his ultimate sentence at the next hearing, which may be set for December 2024. Derek is currently being held in adult custody under 24-hour supervision while his family and the general public await the outcome. Traditional ideas of guilt, innocence, and rehabilitation in the legal system have been called into question by the case, which has had a long-lasting effect. What elements, in your opinion, might have contributed to Derek's choice to carry out this crime? His actions could have been motivated by a number of things, including jealousy, specific psychological issues, or the possible influence of his online friend. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A plastic bag was discovered by a woman walking her dog along the shores of Deer Island, which is close to Boston, Massachusetts, on the afternoon of June 25, 2015. Her dog's incessant curiosity led her to a horrifying discovery: the dead body of a child. After she had initially written it off as discarded trash, she was so shocked and scared that she called the police right away. Because of the extreme stage of decomposition, the child's identity remained elusive despite their best efforts. 3 months passed before the child was identified. Who could have committed such a crime in their right mind? As soon as the child's body was discovered on Deer Island, the investigation into her death got underway. Authorities put forth a lot of effort to identify her despite her extreme decomposition. She was found with a zebra print blanket inside the bag, and only a pair of white leggings with a black polka dot design. Early skepticism resulted in fruitless efforts to use cadaver dogs to find more bodies or remains. The body had already started to decompose, making visual identification impossible, and fingerprints could not be collected due to prolonged exposure to water. The race and ethnicity of the child were unknown to the investigators. How her remains got to the scene was unknown. It was unclear if the body had been dumped on the beach or if it had floated in the water from somewhere else, possibly as far away as Canada. Because the body was not sufficiently decomposed, authorities thought the victim had been placed at the scene rather than washing ashore. On July 3, 2015, an autopsy was performed after the child's body was found, but the cause of death was not established. Authorities suspected foul play, but the remains showed no obvious signs of injury. Tests were then performed to look for alcohol, drugs, or toxins that might have contributed to the death. Eventually, it was discovered that the child had Hispanic heritage. According to the description, her hair was 14 inches long, wavy, and brown, indicating that it had been untrimmed for some time. She weighed about 30 pounds and was estimated to be between 3'1" and 3'6". There were no noticeable scars or birthmarks on her body. The blanket was thought to be from Cannon Mills, possibly sold at Kmart, while her clothes, which were estimated to be a size 4T, were made by the Serco company. and might have been purchased at Target. There was also an elastic hairband. Despite her unknown status, she didn't show any symptoms of malnutrition and seemed to have had a good life. After earlier attempts to identify the body failed, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children digitally recreated the child's face to help identify her. Adobe Photoshop was used to create the reconstruction, which included stock and mortuary photos to approximate her appearance in life. In an effort to gather more details, flyers with pictures of the child and her possessions were handed out. On July 4, 2015, information about the child's discovery and physical measurements were added to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NAMUS. Despite ruling out more than 200 missing persons, no matches were found. No one came forward to identify the victim or take responsibility for the crime, despite a lot of effort. The investigation relied heavily on forensic testing. Although DNA samples were taken from the body's teeth and hair, none of the profiles found in databases of known missing people matched. The University of North Texas received additional samples for more detailed profiling. Despite the lengthy process, it was concluded that she might have traveled to any of the 6 New England states, as well as possibly other places. She could have traveled across the nation, according to tests on her hair and enamel. In an interview, television host John Walsh discussed the case and encouraged viewers who have information to come forward. Authorities received a lot of tips, but many leads did not result in meaningful action. The establishment of a 24-hour hotline and fax hotline allowed people to submit information anonymously, and as a result, submissions came from all over the United States and beyond. The child was identified as Bella Nevaeh Amoroso Bond on September 18, 2015, following 3 exhausting months of ceaseless searching. On August 6, 2012, Joe Amoroso and Rochelle Bond welcomed her into the world. After Laura Springs, Rochelle Bond's neighbor, revealed a connection between Bella and the baby doe, Bella was identified. Michaela Springs, Laura's sister, was worried about Bella's ongoing absence from the home. She confronted Rochelle and Michael McCarthy, her boyfriend, who said the Department of Children and Families, DCF, had taken Bella away. This was later shown to be false, though. On September 17, 2015, Michaela called the police believing baby doe to be Bella. At Rochelle Bond's residence in Dorchester, Massachusetts, a search warrant was carried out. Joe Amoroso, Bella's biological father, had spoken to her over the phone but had never met her. Amoroso expressed skepticism about Rochelle's involvement and conjectured that her boyfriend might have given her heroin to sedate her. But Bella's paternal grandmother doubted the veracity of Rochelle's claims and thought she had a significant role in Bella's demise. Detectives dug deep into Rochelle and Michael's past, all the way back to November 2011 when Bella was conceived, in order to piece together what had happened. Her mother, Rochelle, was heavily involved in the local drug scene, had a strong heroin addiction, and used illicit means to finance her addiction. Joe Amoroso, Rochelle's partner, was also battling addiction in spite of the difficulties. When Joe learned that Rochelle had cheated on him, their relationship soured. He never saw his daughter and vanished before Bella was born. Rochelle was adamant about keeping Bella, even though her addiction had previously cost her custody of her other children. Bella was born at Boston Medical Center on August 6, 2012. Rochelle's determination to be a responsible mother was reinforced when she saw her daughter for the first time. However, allegations of neglect surfaced in spite of her efforts. She found an apartment in the neighboring city of Dorchester and made an effort to give Bella a secure home. Even though Rochelle loved Bella, she battled her addiction, and sometimes her old habits came back. Carelessness was still being reported, which was indicative of Rochelle's ongoing struggle with heroin addiction and how it affected her capacity to look after Bella. As the months went by, Rochelle received calls from the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families in 2012 and 2013 regarding the domestic situation. Feeling the pressure of being a single parent, Rochelle continued to speak with Joe on the phone. Although he re-established contact with the family, he never made it back to see Bella in person. In January 2015, Rochelle started dating Michael McCarthy because she was looking for a partner. Everything appeared to be normal at first, but Michael's behavior quickly began to become unpredictable. He lived with Rochelle and Bella and was obsessed with supernatural subjects. Their relationship rapidly deteriorated as they both became addicted to drugs. When the abuse was reported to the police, nothing was done, and things continued as they were. Rochelle had been lying to them, which is why no one noticed Bella's absence. After visiting their home, she made a false claim that Bella had been taken away by the DCF, saying that the situation was too difficult. People accepted Rachel's story without question because of the situation. Investigators obtained a search warrant and questioned Rachel and Michael because of their suspicions and Rachel's false claims about the DCF removing the child. Eventually, Rochelle admitted to the terrible things that had happened that fateful night. She claimed that Michael had become enraged and had attacked Bella several times because he thought the child was possessed. Rochelle tried CPR on Bella after she passed out, but Michael intimidated her and disposed of the body in the harbor. This supported the investigators' long-held suspicions of foul play in Bella's case. However, Rochelle's participation sparked doubts about her competence. Some inconsistencies, like declaring Bella alive on a benefits form, raised questions about her intentions and degree of participation. On September 18, 2015, Michael and Rochelle were taken into custody. According to medical evidence, Bella may have died from severe abdominal trauma. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Henry Niels, suggested that this trauma might have resulted in cardiac arrest or asphyxiation. When Michael was arrested, he denied knowing about Bella's passing in spite of these facts. Michael McCarthy and Rochelle Bond each gave their own account of what happened during their June 2017 trials. Michael made an effort to place the blame on Rochelle by depicting her as a drug-addicted and careless mother. Rochelle, meanwhile, insisted she was innocent of the crime, but acknowledged that she assisted in disposing of the body under Michael's pressure. Because she kept claiming benefits for Bella after her death, she was also charged with welfare fraud. Although the court tended to accept Rachel's account during her trial, she was still charged with serious crimes, with cadaver dogs proving that a body had been found in the McCarthy home and bruises on the body that matched Rachel's description. The evidence against Michael appeared to be stronger. But there was no concrete proof that Michael was responsible for Bella's passing. Michael's defense team claimed that because Rochelle had allegedly informed him that Bella had been taken away by the state's child welfare agency, he was unaware that she was missing. A complicated web of deceit, abuse, and addiction within Bella's family was exposed by the trials. Michaela Springs' testimony as a crucial witness, meanwhile, highlighted the emotional cost of pursuing justice for Bella. Following the untimely death of Bella Bond, Michael McCarthy was found guilty of second-degree murder on June 28, 2017, and given a life sentence with the possibility of release in 20 years. In the end, Rochelle entered a guilty plea and was given a considerably reduced probationary period. Investigations into Bella's case, however, revealed grave mistakes and misconduct, raising concerns about how the Department of Children and Families handled her case. Prior to McCarthy's sentencing, Bella's biological father, Joe Amoroso, gave a victim impact statement in which he expressed his deep sorrow over the death of his daughter. Although Joe had never met Bella, he stressed the importance of her life and regretted not being able to be her father. The Office of the Child Advocate's investigation found significant mistakes in the child welfare system. Only a formal written warning was given by the agency to the employee who committed the misconduct. Bella Bond's case generated a lot of national attention, as evidenced by the activity on Facebook and Twitter. A funeral home promised funds for a dignified burial with a headstone, and other people offered to pay for her funeral and burial. Joe Amoroso disclosed that Bella would be buried in Winthrop, Massachusetts, with her family by her side, choosing to hold wake services and a public funeral. However, after both of her parents ultimately decided against holding a public funeral, Bella was finally buried in a private ceremony at Winthrop Cemetery on November 28, 2015. Her name and the date of her discovery were engraved on the headstone beneath which she was interred. Later, Bella's mother's Facebook page posted pictures of her. When we consider Bella's story, it becomes evident that her untimely death was caused by her parents' negligence. The acts of Rochelle Bond and Michael McCarthy, both inside and outside of prison, were heinous. Bella's story emphasizes how urgently vulnerable children need to be better protected. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. After opening in 1954, the Fontainebleau Hotel quickly gained popularity among Miami's elite. Benjamin Novak founded it and oversaw the property until 1977. Bernice Novak, his wife, was a prominent figure in Miami's social life. In 1956, Bernice, a former fashion model in New York, and Benjamin welcomed their only son, Ben Novak Jr. Ben carried on his famous family's legacy while growing up in the glitz and glamour of this iconic American hotel, making use of his connections and power. Ben's life wasn't without its difficulties, even though his parents were famous and socialized with celebrities. He missed out on deep friendships with peers and frequently felt alone as a child because he was surrounded by adults. Many of his early experiences seemed to him to have been staged and fabricated by the adults in his life. He turned to comics as a means of escape, and Batman emerged as his favorite character. His early interest turned into a major passion as he grew older, and he eventually accumulated one of the biggest collections of memorabilia in the world, which included his very own Batmobile. Ben Novak Jr. inherited his parents' business sense in addition to their wealth. He was more than just a comic book fan. He was a clever businessman who loved what he did. He entered the convention industry with the intention of becoming well known because he was determined to establish his own identity apart from the family legacy. He continued to work in the hotel sector, organizing conventions with success and making good money each time. Unfortunately, he would ultimately meet a tragic end at one of these conventions. Ben, however, pursued a different interest prior to that depressing development. His life took a drastic turn when he met Narcissa, a stripper at a Miami strip club. He had a thing for strippers. In 1983, Narcissa Sierra Valise Pacheco relocated to Miami. Being the youngest of 6 children and the family favorite, she grew up in a rural part of Ecuador and was well protected by her older brothers. She married Angel when she was 17, and the two of them had a daughter, May Abad. The family moved to New York City when May was 4 years old, but Angel soon left Narcissa and their daughter after the marriage rapidly soured. Narcissa remained in New York as a single mother and put in a lot of effort as a seamstress, but she felt that a life of more luxury was her destiny. In her ideal world, she would be able to drive fancy cars, go to glitzy parties, own and flaunt expensive clothing, and take luxury yacht cruises. Driven by this aspiration, Narcissa imagined a life devoid of worries about money and rent. But in the end, this dream would take her in a problematic direction. Narcissa made the decision to move to Miami with her daughter in the summer of 1983 in order to start over. At first, she struggled to find work because of her poor command of English. Narcissa started working as a stripper in order to make quick cash and provide for her and her daughter. She saw it as a chance to meet rich men who were prepared to spend a lot of money. When Ben Novak Jr., a 27-year-old millionaire, entered her club shortly after she opened, she struck gold. She and Ben clicked right away after a lap dance. Ben gave Narcissa lavish presents, lavished her with lavish vacations, and gave her sizable sums of money. Narcissa's fascination with luxury only grew as a result. But this new relationship didn't exactly sit well with Ben's family. His mother, Bernice, who was very close to him, was unimpressed, and his father had died. Ben's mother's disapproval of Narcissa did not stop him, even though they spoke every day and she had a big influence on him. Instead of marrying a stripper, Bernice had hoped he would wed a reputable Miami socialite. When Narcissa married Ben in 1991, she accomplished her goal. She had a knack for it and was actively involved in his business from the start, managing bookings, attending conventions, and interacting with clients. Narcissa, however, favored a relaxed way of life, engaging in endless shopping and leading a carefree millionaire's lifestyle. While Ben followed his passion for Batman collectibles and became the second largest collector in the world, she developed an obsessive shopping habit. They enjoyed their gourmet meals, fancy cars, and mansion vacations. They also took in May Abad, Narcissa's daughter, who was in her late teens at the time. Ben became the father figure she had been missing for 18 years, and they grew close. May, Ben, and Narcissa led a lavish lifestyle, but on April 4, 2009, Ben's mother, Bernice, died suddenly. Turning his life upside down, A neighbor found Bernice's body in her Fort Lauderdale residence. Her death was officially declared an accident, despite the suspicious circumstances. Blood was discovered flowing through the kitchen and into the laundry room from her car. According to the authorities, she must have fallen and hurt herself, striking her head on the car mirror, before bleeding as she entered the vehicle and eventually passing away. After his mother passed away, Ben was devastated by the loss and went into a deep depression. Narcissa pretended to be a helpful wife while attending the funeral. Ben threw himself into his work at Convention Concepts Unlimited as a way to deal with his loss. Ben and Narcissa arrived in New York on July 12, 2009, where Ben was in charge of a significant conference at the Rye Brook Hilton. More than 1,000 people attended the event, which was for the esteemed client Amway Global International. Around 7 a.m. on the morning of the 12th, Narcissa left their room to join her daughter for breakfast. About 30 minutes later, she came back into the room to find her husband bleeding and bound on the floor. He had already passed away. Another member of the well-known Novak family had been murdered only 3 months after Bernice's passing. Ben's death was promptly deemed a homicide by the authorities. Ben was discovered with his hands bound behind his back and his legs duct-taped together below the knees, only wearing his underwear. He had been lying in bed, probably asleep, when he had been hit in the head by something. The attacker left his body face down on the floor after bludgeoning him to death. Police discovered the bed covered in blood that had spilled onto the floor around his dead body. Ben's eyes had been gouged out at the scene, which was a terrifying detail. Narcissa told the police right away that she thought the murder might have been a robbery, but the room didn't seem to be lacking anything. Not even a few $100s in an envelope was damaged. One would anticipate that valuables, particularly cash, would have been taken if it had been a robbery. Additionally, according to Narcissa, Ben had a recent heated argument about money with someone at a Comic-Con, and the other person had allegedly threatened him. Lead detectives swiftly rejected it, despite the fact that they could find no proof for it. Investigators briefly looked into the Novak family's prior ties to the mafia, but quickly concluded that this approach was fruitless because Ben Jr. had no affiliation with organized crime. Rather, Narcissa was the subject of increased police scrutiny. Even though she was in control, she asked strange and inappropriate questions, like whether Ben might have had a heart attack and died. Given the graphic and brutal manner of his death, his body was bound and his head bludgeoned. This question raised eyebrows. At the station, Narcissa was taken in for additional interrogation. Her answers cast serious doubt on her version of what happened. She said that after returning from breakfast, she stumbled over Ben's body and screamed as she called the operator. Despite the blood-soaked room, she also claimed that she didn't recall seeing any blood, which ran counter to the police's account of the scene. She also mentioned sitting next to Ben and rubbing his leg, which seemed strange given that his head had sustained the majority of the damage. Suspicions were heightened by her inconsistency in failing to notice the blood. Additionally, investigators were attempting to ascertain how the murderer entered the room. The hotel's electronic door locks tracked each key's usage by date and time, and Narcissa was the only one with a key. The last time the key was used, according to the hotel's records, was 11:30 p.m. the previous evening and was only used once more when Narcissa came in at 7:30 a.m. following breakfast. The key had no other applications. A hotel witness also claimed to have seen a woman who fit Narcissa's description strolling around with 2 men. When the police questioned Narcissa, she denied this. Detectives became more and more certain that Narcissa was responsible for Ben Novak Jr.'s murder as the investigation went on. Their suspicions were confirmed by Mayabad, Narcissa's daughter, who disclosed that her parents' marriage was strained. She clarified that, despite being married, Ben continued to engage in stripper activities due to his struggles with infidelity. May implied that Narcissa's anxiety was more related to the possibility of divorce than jealousy. Narcissa knew that a divorce would cost her the way of life she had become used to, so she was terrified that Ben would leave her for another woman. This was a legitimate fear. Narcissa hired men to break into her and Ben's house in 2002 as part of a home invasion plot. For 25 hours, they held him captive while he was restrained. According to her daughter, Narcissa had a history of using drastic methods to keep Ben from leaving her, and would go to great lengths to get what she wanted. Ben called the police to report the incident, but he later dropped the charges, and the case was categorized as a domestic dispute instead. Detectives still did not have enough evidence to charge Narcissa, even with the growing suspicions and evidence against her. After questioning, they chose to send Narcissa and her daughter back to their hotel. May begged her mother to tell the truth during this time. In response, Narcissa reminded her daughter of their relationship but gave no other details. Police were called to the Novak residence for a reported domestic disturbance 3 days after Ben was killed. May Abad clarified that she immediately went to the house to look for evidence against her mother after returning from New York. Narcissa found her while she was looking through documents and used a crowbar to attack her, accusing her of betraying her country. According to Narcissa, she grabbed the crowbar in self-defense after May started the fight and attempted to start a fire. The Fort Lauderdale home of Novak was searched by police. They confiscated 5 rolls of duct tape, documents, computers, bills, and security tapes. May, worried that her mother might inherit her stepfather's estate, hired a lawyer to freeze the estate as the investigation surrounding Narcissa Novak became more intense. She also got in touch with the detectives in New York a few months later to offer more proof. Narcissa knew that Ben was having a serious affair with Rebecca Bliss, a porn star, in 2008. May claims that Ben's declarations that he intended to leave Narcissa caused her mother to become extremely alarmed. May thought that Narcissa's murderous intent was motivated by the possibility of divorce. Narcissa did not like the prenuptial agreement, which stated that she would only get $60,000 and give up any claim to Ben's millions in the event of a divorce. Ben's will left his mother the majority of his assets, so even if he died, Narcissa would still lose out. But there was uncertainty about Narcissa's possible inheritance, because his mother had only passed away 3 months prior. The police also questioned Cristobal Veliz, Narcissa's brother. He claimed that Narcissa's daughter May Abad was the murder's mastermind. Cristobal implied that there was a cover-up behind May's tardiness in disclosing Ben's affair with Rebecca Bliss. Narcissa told the FBI that she had found explicit love letters from Ben to his stepdaughter May, which further complicated things. According to Cristobal Veliz, he could demonstrate that May Abad had framed her mother and hired a hitman, Alejandro Garcia, to kill Ben. Garcia was taken into custody for an unrelated offense in November 2009. He was questioned about the Novak murder while he was in detention. When Garcia realized how serious his situation was, he made a deal and admitted to killing Ben Novak Jr. He asserted, however, that Cristobal Veliz, not May Abad, had employed him. According to Garcia, Veliz paid him $5,000 to commit the murder. Police were unable to locate any receipts from Cristobal's residence to verify the transaction, but surveillance footage showed Garcia retrieving a payment receipt from Cristobal. Garcia decided to cooperate further because he was already facing prison time, and he disclosed a shocking fact. This was not the first murder he had committed under Cristobal Veliz's supervision. Alejandro Garcia was hired in April 2009 to murder Bernice Novak as she went into her garage. Garcia viciously struck her face after attacking her with a monkey wrench. It was discovered that in order to inherit Ben Novak's wealth, Narcissa Novak had planned the murders of Bernice and Ben with the assistance of her brother, Cristobal Veliz. To take over the estate, Narcissa had to get rid of Bernice. Alejandro Garcia testified during the trial that Bernice was supposed to be beaten severely and struck in the teeth. While Ben was asleep on the morning of July 12, 2009, Narcissa opened her husband's hotel room to Garcia and Joel Gonzalez. They started attacking Ben after she led them to his bedside. Narcissa told one of the men to gouge out Ben's eyes and gave Garcia a pillow to muffle Ben's screams. Garcia's testimony aligned with the police-discovered evidence. A rumpled photo of Narcissa's daughter May Abad was discovered in Garcia's pocket upon his arrest, indicating that she was also a target. Cristobal and Narcissa had also plotted May's murder. Police questioned why Ben's burial was delayed after his body was kept at the Westchester County morgue for 2 months. The investigation found that Narcissa was preoccupied with rifling through Ben's Batman collection, embezzling funds from his business accounts, and swaying bank tellers to gain access to his safe deposit box instead of attending his funeral. Narcisa and Cristobal were taken into custody for the killings on July 8, 2010. They were officially charged with the murder of Bernice Novak. Their trial started on April 23, 2012, a year later. Despite his decision to testify in his own defense, Cristobal gave a terrible performance. During cross-examination, he contradicted himself several times. Both Narcisa and Cristobal maintained their denials of involvement, even after video footage showed Garcia and Gonzalez monitoring the hotel, and phone records showed a 2-year correspondence between the two that implied premeditation. Ben had been preparing to leave Narcisa, according to Rebecca Bliss, his mistress, who testified. Rebecca disclosed that Ben was willing to improve their relationship after expressing discontent with his marriage. Every day, he assured her of his commitment to her and declared his love for her. Rebecca had previously been confronted by Narcisa regarding the affair, and she had turned down her offer of money to leave Ben. At one point, Narcisa even pretended to be Rebecca, which led to Rebecca's apartment losing power. Furthermore, Rebecca said that 6 months prior to Ben's actual passing, Narcisa had lied to her condo management by claiming that he was dead and therefore unable to pay rent. Narcisa threatened that no one else would have Ben if she couldn't, according to Rebecca. In an attempt to receive lighter sentences, Narcisa and Cristobal both tried to place the blame on the other during the trial. Cristobal was the main mastermind behind the killings, according to Narcisa's lawyer, who argued for a reduced sentence of 27 years. Cristobal continued to blame his niece May Abad as the main conspirator. In the meantime, Narcisa was found guilty on 12 of the 13 charges against her, while Cristobal was found guilty on 14 of the 15 charges, even though detectives had thoroughly investigated and rejected these claims. Narcisa's conviction resulted in her losing all claim to the inheritance she had hoped to inherit. The 2 sons of May Abad will now inherit Ben's estate. Evidence provided by the prosecution showed that Narcisa had paid her brother to employ 2 hitmen. According to the murderer's testimony, Cristobal had enlisted their help and given them instructions from Narcisa on how to carry out the assaults. Binding Ben and gouging out his eyes were among the instructions. When the murderers reached the hotel early on July 12, Narcisa let them into her husband's room, led them to Ben, who was asleep, and gave him a pillow to stop him from screaming. Ben was severely beaten with dumbbells until he passed out, leaving him for dead. According to Garcia's testimony, the initial intention was not to kill Ben and Bernice, but rather to cause them severe injuries. Both Narcisa and Cristobal were found guilty at the end of the trial of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, stalking, domestic abuse, money laundering, and witness tampering. When the guilty verdict was read, Narcisa gave up her right to appear in court. Both were convicted and given life sentences without the possibility of release. As a result of their cooperation with the investigation, Alejandro and Joel entered guilty pleas to lesser charges and received sentences of 17.5 years. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.